Brandon, thank you for coming back on the program.
No, it's good to be here, brother. How you doing?
Very good, man. Very good. So, what has been going on since the last time we chatted?
Yeah, I think I sent you a little bit about that. I'm started a life coaching business that I've been working on. It's kind of stemmed out of my experience in so many other areas of life, and we can get into that in a second. But I also published a book.
Mm,
Is Deeper Meaning. Got that here, and yeah, and I've moved back to the North Carolina area. I was in Nashville last time we spoke.
mhm.
I'm doing some new pastoral work here. And it's been a busy season, man. It's been a busy season, but like with regards to like the life coaching stuff, I think a lot of that has come in from like I've experienced. Um, I think there's four areas of life that have really changed my life around, and I call it the 4F system, which is faith, family, fitness, finance. And I think when you get these four areas in balance, you are in a happy spot. You're in a fulfilled spot. And I think it leads to like greater meaning in your life. And so I've really been structuring the students that I'm taking on around this method to help them build their life up, because I think we live in an age, if I'm going to be honest, with a lot of despair. And I think we've talked about that before.
So, why these particular four Fs? Like, what do they represent in your life, and how did you come to understand them and implement them?
Yeah. So funny enough, so like let's start with basic ones. I think most people know, like we're in an age, especially like with how the economy's been, where finances, if you don't have that down, you're going to be struggling just to get out of rock bottom. And we were going to talk about some of that for sure. And I think a lot of people feel despair in that area. Um, I think people feel like they're locked in because society's it's more difficult to navigate in certain ways, but in other ways it's actually easier to navigate, and that's kind of a whole nother conversation. But I think when you don't understand how to control your finances, I'm not just talking about generating wealth. I'm talking about building assets. I'm talking about revenue, different income streams, uh, building out generational wealth, hopefully, potentially for
Mhm.
the next generation, for your family, and also getting debt under control, because I think that's a huge crisis. The credit card crisis is astronomically bad right now in this country. Well, actually, all around the world, but I know here in America it's really, really bad. I know up in Canada it's bad too. So I think that's one area, and then you have to deal with fitness. I think if you don't have your health in order, and that doesn't just have to deal with like going to the gym, man. That has to deal with like how you're eating. That has to go with like how you're sleeping. Um, I think a lot of these things are intuitive, and I could go through each one with your faith. And I think if you don't have faith, you don't have some type of deeper purpose you're aiming for. And the last one is family, because if you don't have connections, and it doesn't just have to be like wife or kids or whatever, it could be like your friends is part of your family, man. Like whoever is closest to you in your life. You don't have to have uh what is considered the nuclear family to have family. Family
Right.
are the people who are going to die for you, who are going to be out there for you. They're ride or dies, right? And I think when you develop those four areas of your life, I've not ran into somebody who's really excelling in all four of those areas that is struggling to the same extent. Everybody struggles, but to the same extent that people are really lacking in one of those areas.
Hmm. I mean, there's so much to talk about there. It's incredibly juicy. I agree with you on this aspect of, I think on all of those Fs. I don't mean to make a joke out of it, but we are
Yeah.
failing. Um,
Yeah, that's good though. That's good.
it's like, faith, people always refer to Nietzsche, God is dead, but like,
Yeah.
is is God really dead right now?
Yeah.
In terms of fitness, 100% eating. It's like we have access to the healthiest foods, but we're all overweight. We're all,
Yes.
we're not exercising properly. We can't even talk about being overweight or
No.
fitness in general,
No, you can't.
without
Getting
politics
somebody
being
upset.
confused.
Yeah.
Exactly. And family 100%. I think what one of the last conversations I had with Christopher Lind, we were talking about, because he has 7 children, and it's like
Really.
Gen Z probably aren't even thinking about having one. So
No.
how do you build family? Well, that would be an interesting question. I'll come back to it. How do you build family without children? And then how do you think about
Mm.
having kids in the future? Because you said that family is not just blood, it can also be friends as well.
Yes.
And sorry, the last F was slipping my mind. Finances.
Yes.
Yeah, people don't fucking understand money at all. At
Yeah.
all.
No.
Let's,
No.
you know, I
No.
I I can't believe how many people are like, yeah, but did you invest in this cryptocurrency? It's like, dude, that's you're not gonna get rich off of $100. So
There you go.
in terms of this life coaching, how are people responding to it? And how do people accept and then start
Mhm.
implementing the information that you're prescribing them?
I think you have to take each person individual, right? Like you can write workout routines for somebody who's been doing it for like 10 years. You're not going to write the same routine that you're going to write for somebody who's never been to the gym. And I think that applies to everything. If you're dealing with somebody who has, let's say they're running a business and they're looking to scale their business, I'm not going to approach finances with them the same way I'm going to approach somebody who's working, just entering the workforce 9 to 5, has a bunch of debt because they made some bad decisions. And that applies for everything. You can deal with people who are like really set on their faith, and then you can deal with people who are like, I don't really know if this even means anything to me, but I'm interested in some type of spirituality. And that goes for all the areas, man. It really does. It goes for all the areas. And I think, to answer your question about like some of the stuff about like family and stuff like that, yes, I don't think it's just limited to the immediate family. And I really do believe we are, funny enough, the financial, all these things. The reason I picked these 4 things is because they interplay with each other, right?
Mhm.
So like,
Absolutely.
the reason Gen Z isn't having kids, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is it's financially not tenable.
Mhm.
It's not financially tenable. In fact, our generation is the first generation. I say millennials, Gen Z, kind of wrapping us up together. We are having less kids that can keep the population at going at bay. We're actually going to diminish in population because we're having less children. We're having less than I think it's 2.2 is needed to continue the population, and we're having less than that on average. So, and I think a lot of that's due to finances. I think there's a lot that goes into that, but I think one of the
Sure.
areas is finances, you know?
So, I mean, if we can just take a step back and unpack it, how did we come to this juncture in history where we're not making enough babies up to replacement rates? You know, people are using buy now, pay later services for things like groceries. That's the
Yes.
economic state of the world. You know, people don't turn to religion anymore. Instead, they turn to
Mhm.
politics, which is, I think,
Yes.
worse. And, you know, people just don't understand money. And so, again, they pay for things that they can't afford through
Mhm.
social media, trying to emulate lifestyles that don't exist. And then, you know, this feeds into them eating horrible foods that are just
Yeah.
packed with chemicals, excuse me, that causes them to, again, seek other things like
Mm.
crypto, like, you know,
Mhm.
not safe for work content, whatever it is. So
There you go.
I guess starting with faith,
Yeah.
what is your faith and how do you think about faith?
Let's go one by one, because I feel like they do interplay, but I think it's a good idea, like you're saying, to go one by one. So my background, I grew up in a Christian household, but I hated the church.
Mhm.
I thought it was a judgmental place. I did not really enjoy going at all. I thought it was boring. I was like, I don't really need the church to know God anyways. Went to college, had an atheist roommate. We'd go back and forth, but neither of us really knew what we were talking about. But one day I was actually on Easter, of all days, on Easter, I was watching a documentary on the life of Jesus, and I heard a quote from the book of Matthew. It's of, I've not come to bring peace, but a sword. And I was like, well, that's not the Jesus I grew up with, because
Mm.
I was always fed some romanticized version by the church. So I totally rejected it. I was totally rejected it. I was like, I don't understand this. Um, but funny enough, like we're talking about how they all interplay, I noticed actually the quality of my life started to deteriorate over the next
Mm.
couple of months, and it forced me to really do some introspection. And I thought, it's not fair for me to reject something if I've not taken the time to understand it.
Mhm.
So I started praying and reading the Bible. And I actually was studying a couple different religions too. I was taking a world religions class at the time. I studied Islam, Buddhism, Judaism, Sikhism,
Mm.
the Baha'i faith. A lot of people don't even know what that is. Yeah, so you got a lot of
Yeah.
stuff out there, right?
Yeah.
And uh, long story short, because I don't want to go too, I can go down the rabbit hole, but
Please.
I ended up going into this. My friend invited me to this Christian college organization. I was like, oh, this is different. This isn't like church, because they would like hang out, but they were still Christian. It was weird.
Yep.
And I brought them my toughest questions. I was InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, and also this Ratio Christi Christian Apologetics Alliance.
Mhm.
And I went there and I would bring in my difficult questions, and over time I found myself like more open to it.
Mhm.
And about a month before something very important happened, I was listening to Caleb Radio, and I was listening to some Christian music. They had challenged you to just do a month of listening to Christian music and take everything else out and see what happens to your life. It's like, why not? So I did that, and at the end of the month, they had this advertisement for Winter Jam. It was a concert in Raleigh, where I grew up, and I was coming back home from school. So I was like, okay, it was a Good Friday. a year after I had that whole atheist experience. And um, at that concert during the Matthew West song Grace Wins, I encountered God's presence for the first time in my life. I always thought God was more of a head knowledge,
Mm.
but I had a personal encounter. And I don't mean like I saw him visibly, but it's like a spiritual encounter. I actually equate it very similar to anybody who's dealt with any hallucinogenics or anything like that.
Mm.
If you dealt with that kind of stuff, and they talk about some type of awakening a lot of times, but this is an awakening, a sober awakening. It's totally different, and so uh, that just radically shifted my life. And I never thought I would go into ministry because I was on the political science route. I was working in DC. I was a state chair for a 501c3. And I was all over the place. We talked about some of the business I've done with real estate. Well, I can go in that's like a whole nother story, but I ended up going a long way down the route. I ended up going to the military, finding myself in the faith. And you want to know like all of this is just in a really quick sentence, what really made it different for me, because I dealt with faith my whole life. And a lot of people are like, oh, Christianity is going to make you a better person. And I think every faith seeks to make you a better person. What's distinct about Christianity is I don't think its primary goal is not to make bad people good people, because
Mhm.
all religion seeks to do that. I think that's important. But I think what makes it distinct is it's not making just that. It's about making dead people alive people,
Mm.
because God lives in you. And that's a personal encounter that's unique. And so I'm quite interested in other religions as well. Since my time studying, I have a Quran in my house. I've studied a lot of even some Hinduism too. So I just think what happened after that is I realized life isn't just about me. I think the reason, getting into the Gen Z stuff and millennials, my generation, the reason we're seeking all these other things is because we don't have fulfillment that's beyond us. And I
Mm.
think that's something faith offers.
Yeah, I mean, I just building off of that, why have particularly Gen Z and millennials abdicated faith? Like it seems like it wasn't slowly and then all at once. It was just all at
Mm-hmm.
once. Like it was like they were born faithless.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Like why did they just, is it because they didn't need it because they had other outlets or
Funny enough, I do think like I can only speak to my own personal experience, and then I can kind of extrapolate from there. But
sure.
I think a lot of times we live in a comfortable enough world, even though we're struggling.
Yeah.
And I think faith comes when you're truly hitting rock bottom. I think
Mm.
you're not gonna. They always say you're not gonna. It's very hard to find an atheist in a foxhole in the middle of war. Because all of a sudden when things become existential,
Mhm.
you start looking to the existential. So whereas when you don't have to, you don't. And I think it's the same thing. When you're under your parents' financial well-being, you're not that concerned with finances. I mean, you are, like, ideally, but it's not to the same degree as you get older and you start to realize the daunting task of what's before you. And
Mhm.
I think that's why you find less atheists as you get into the older generations. But I think the main reason, that's part of it, but I think the main reason that it's honestly dead in our generations is because I think we understand it incorrectly. I think it's been taught to us incorrectly. And by that I mean, people always say, oh, people aren't living it correctly. The people who do believe it, they don't live it. And I think that's because that's the misrepresentation. Faith, if people could live their faith perfectly, they wouldn't need God. Faith is
Mm.
saying, I know I'm not perfect enough.
Mhm.
Therefore, I need God. Does that make sense? It's so, like, in the Christian, I mean, I can speak through the Christian lens.
Sure.
The Christian lens is, I need a redemption. I am incapable of saving myself. Therefore, I need a savior. If I was perfect, why would I need a savior? Why would I need God?
Mm. So
There,
I mean, so
there,
I mean, I still don't. Sorry to cut you off.
yeah.
I don't understand where this perfection mindset came in the generation. Because
Mm,
if we're correlating perfection of the individual, like I guess self perfection,
yeah.
as one of the reasons or the biggest reason for not needing faith, how did we even find self perfection? I feel like, and again, kind of building a bridge to another topic, but I feel like social media was a massive part of that, where the
Yeah.
personalization came in, and it's just like, oh, like my life. Like I remember one of my friends was saying that social media kind of builds narcissism,
Yes, sir.
like as a default mechanism in your mind,
Yeah.
where you think that like the entire world revolves around you. Like you get main character syndrome as an
Yeah.
emergent property of social media. So I don't know, is this social media like kind of a virus for faith? Like
I
it,
think social, yeah.
yeah.
I think that's great. I think that's actually a great observation. I think it's not just social media. I think it's what we've been taught from kids. I mean, we've
Mm,
been taught from kids to make the world surround us. And I told you the biggest realization I had after I had that whole experience was I had spent my whole life looking to build my kingdom,
yeah.
which is a finite kingdom, meaning it will end, right? But instead of an eternal kingdom that is way beyond me. And I think a lot of that has to play with we make ourselves our own gods.
Mhm.
And I think that type of self-idolatry is a big part of it. Um, and I think social media is a poison in it. I really do. I think social media is a big poison in all of it.
So do you, I mean, this is kind of like a very broad question, but do you think that this loss of faith is one of the reasons why there is so much conflict in the world? Like loss of faith. And I think when we're talking about faith, we're also talking about this underlying aspect of meaning. I think that we're
Mhm.
all searching for meaning. We're all
Yeah,
searching for our why. I love this
yeah,
quote where it's just like the two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. I
yeah, yeah,
love
yeah,
that
yeah,
because
yeah.
I feel like it's such a scary thought to go your entire life without ever finding out why.
Hmm.
It and I'm gonna go on a little tangent, a little
Go
riff
for
here,
it,
but
man. Go for it.
the I'm studying French right now, and the French have this word called dépaysement, which is it's kind of like this feeling of being homesick, right? So you're in a
Okay.
foreign place and you just have like this homesick. You just want to go home. You know that you're not home, and I think we can abstract that understanding out onto modernity, where we're all
Mm,
kind of confused at this foreign civilization. Like it's human civilization. We're all familiar with it. We understand how we got to this juncture in history,
yeah,
but we all don't understand why. Like, why am I working 9 to 9
yeah.
for a company that doesn't care about me?
That's right.
Why am I swiping to try to find love? Why am
I,
I?
yeah.
No, go for it. Go for
No,
it.
I was just thinking a lot of those are distractions and just like social media.
Mm,
I actually think we're we were dealing with the modernity crisis, and our response to that was to do what we're now, which is post-modernity, right? And I
mm,
think that post-modernity, the response to that was to try to be able to question what people considered was truth, which was
mm,
good. But I think we've taken it to such an extreme now that post-modernity basically is in a state where there is no objective truth.
mm,
And there's an argument around the idea that there's no such thing as objective truth, that my truth, your truth, and now there might be your perspective and my perspective, but there is an objective truth. 2 + 2 is 4. It doesn't matter what you feel 2 + 2 is.
mm,
And I know that sounds like a different it seems irrelevant, but it's not irrelevant. And the reason I say that is because when we make truth subjective and there's no such thing as truth, we're now in a state of wandering. And when you're in a state of wandering, you don't have that meaning. You can you're to define the world and the reality that we live in by subjectivity alone.
mhm,
It prevents us from being able to glean the true truth between each other by being able to debate back and forth, have these discussions, be able to delve and be able to believe that at the end of the tunnel, hopefully we're getting closer to what is that objective truth.
mhm. No, no, 100% agree. And this kind of deeper meaning comes
Yeah,
back
there
to
you
your
go, buddy.
book.
There you go.
So, I mean, what prompted you to write this book? What was the philosophy of the book? And
Yeah.
how did you change while writing it?
So actually, the last question I think is probably the most important one. I wrote this about a year and a half ago. I was about to leave it all because I had been burnt out by the church.
Mm,
Even after going head deep into it. But I was doing a more part-time role in the church while I was running my Amazon business and
mhm,
scaling that. Uh, but during my time there, they tasked me with writing the weekly devotional. Well, I did that for a year, and then I over the time it actually changed me.
mm,
And so I compiled this into a book in 40 days. It's so 40 days, and I'm actually going through it myself again right now, and I'm actually You'd think if you wrote something, it wouldn't mean that much of a difference to you, but there's a challenge at the end of each day. And actually, those have really impacted me. It forces you to live it. And faith, people say faith is what you believe, but in James, it talks about even the demons believe. So what makes faith different for us? It can't be just belief. Faith is a trifecta of three things. It's belief, it's trust. This one's the hard one because somebody trusts God. I think that's the main reason you're talking about why Gen Z doesn't follow God. I think they don't trust he's good, because how can we have all this in the world, right? Trust, and then follow, which is the action portion. You're not saved by the follow, but it's the reflection of the change that has occurred in you because you trust and believe in him. And so that is what faith is.
I mean, oh, gosh, you're speaking to my soul right now.
There you go, man.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, there is definitely a loss of trust, and
Yeah.
trust and truth, I think, go together. And when you're talking about there is no, like, people are not finding objective truth, they're not.
Yes.
They're finding political truth, and those are not the
Yeah.
same things. And so we're
Yeah.
all wandering, and we're all just like, okay, well, if your Republican truth is different from my Democratic truth or whatever,
Yeah.
then like it's A and not A. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
compute. We can't build an equation, right?
Yes.
And so I think Gen Z are starting to abstract this mistrust in truth into
Mm.
everyday life, where they just don't want to trust anything. They don't want to trust the government. They don't want to trust the economy. They don't want to trust
Yeah.
other generations. They don't
Well,
want
I
to
don't trust
trust.
any of those things either. So,
Right.
there you go.
And this is why I wanted to start with faith, because I think faith is a foundation for everybody to fall back on. And that sounds
Yes.
bad, but it's actually the most important thing, because once you have
Yes.
faith, you can build your pillars of family, finances,
Yes.
and fitness.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
like I don't think faith is another pillar. I think faith is like the ground floor that you have to construct. Like, you have to build your framework in order to fill it in, right?
It's actually why I have it in that particular order. So
Uh,
it's actually faith, I think, is the foundation, and then I think you have to get your family, and that doesn't, again, it can be just a close network of friends.
yep.
When you have these two things as your basis, and you can go fitness or finance, either one after that, depending on
Mhm.
what you're chasing. But you really need these two things down packed. I would argue that it's good to get your health in order before you even shoot for all that, because if you have your faith, family, and fitness, by that I mean your health all together, you have those, and you're operating on a high level, you are going to succeed in the world, because money will follow success. Money follows people who attract success, and you are attracting success if you are operating on a top level in those areas. And I agree, faith is the foundation, because you can lose it all. And if you lose everything and you have nothing to fall back on, like you said, you are going to go in a pit of despair. I have known so many people, I've dealt with so many people in my life who have had drug issues or depression issues. I've been dealt with suicidal tendencies myself. My wife's cousin, candidly, died of a drug overdose. And I've dealt with people in ministry, I mean, who rock bottom, absolute rock bottom, because and that's when they came to the church, and thank God they came there instead of killing themselves, because some people do. And I think if you don't have that, you realize, and I think this is also why old people are so faithful. At the end of your life, you realize all this other stuff will go. Like, I don't care how much money you have, you're not getting buried with it. I don't care how in shape you are, you're still end up in a coffin. And honestly, the same thing with family is different, because it does transcend this world, I believe. But at the same time, that's still, they're not going to be immediately transcending the world with you. You are going to go yourself first, and I think that has to be a foundation. I completely agree with you.
So how does Gen Z, after they found faith, how do they pursue family? Because one of the things, and I was talking to Christopher about this, is that if I'm a Gen Z, if I'm, let's say, 25 or
Yeah.
26, I think is the oldest Gen Z, or Zillennial as they call
Yes,
them,
millennials. Yes, that's right.
as
There
it
you go.
were. Yeah. And this kind of relates to finance, but I don't want to get too off track. But how do I have a kid in such an economically turbulent um, time? It's like
Yeah.
it's such a big risk and such a big ask, and also not just about finances, but also about maturity. It's like I
Mm,
don't think the average Gen Z has grown up yet to a
mm.
point where they're ready for parenthood. Maybe I'm just immature in saying that. I can totally accept that. But just as an observation, it's like I don't think parenting is like while your baby is crying, just like swiping on TikTok
Yeah,
or whatever while the kid
yeah,
is just there. Or
yeah,
worse, like using your kid as a prop for the TikTok.
yeah, or like Instagram or something like that for
You know,
sure. Yeah,
it just like, so if it's not having kids, as you were saying, how do you build a good network of friends?
yeah.
How do you start that process?
I'm going to go there in just a second. I do want to say one thing about that. The very fact that you realize that makes you more mature in that area than you realize.
Hmm.
And I think Gen Z, I think Gen Z actually has a very good intellectual understanding of a lot of things.
Mhm.
The difference with Gen Z is, I think, and it's crazy to say this, and I think this falls into millennials too. I don't think we take enough risk. And that's crazy for amount of risk I feel like I've taken in my life, because I've taken a lot of risk. But I was like, am I taking the risk the same level of like the people who founded like America, or for instance, like some of these people that like, I was thinking about Sylvester Stallone. He was an actor, right? Rocky. The guy was living homeless, and he sold his dog to
Yeah.
be able to be able to sell his script. And it's like, dude, those kind of risks, they put everything on the line. We put a lot on the line. We don't put everything on the line. And I think
Mhm.
kids fall under that category too. They're a scary thing, because it's like, we've intellectually processed from all the things our parents have said or what we've seen. It's going to change your life around. And I don't think that's the only way you can develop family, though. To answer your question, I do believe that I call I really believe a family is like, um, for a lack of a better term, a mafia, right? Like
Mm.
you think about the mafia, like, I'm going to die for you. We are loyal. And I think you can have that with friends. I've had that with friends in the past. And I think when you have your mafia around you, like people who are going to be with you no matter what, who are going to care about you, whether you're broke as a joke or you're a millionaire, that's family. And I know people who have had horrible family life because their parents were either not there, their dad may have not been there, maybe their mom's abusive, maybe they don't have any siblings. They found family in those friendships, and you can develop that. And anybody who's successful, they will tell you their way to the top is not a solo entrepreneur. It's called an entrepreneur for a reason, because they built a network of people to get there. That's always the case.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've heard billionaires always talk about the importance of networks, the importance of connections. But
Yeah.
just to backtrack, when you're talking about risk, I 100% agree. It's like what we should be doing is uh, um, outdoing the risks of the past generation. So they
Mm,
had, a certain amount of risk, and we try to
yes,
beat
sir.
that.
Yeah.
So why is everybody, how do we come to such a comfortable place? Is this just a product, like an emergent property of modern civilization where we have enough food,
Yeah.
we have enough energy,
Yeah.
we have enough resources, we have enough energy, we have enough population, and we have no real threat to our lives other than other humans?
I do think that's a lot of it. I think we don't deal with as many existential crises as people did like 300 years ago. Like, even you're dealing, especially you go back to like the Middle Ages, you didn't know if you're going to make it to 15. So you
Hmm.
might as well just live your life all out. Now it's
Right.
like, oh, you better plan because you want to make sure you're in the right spot by this age. And so what we do is we play the game of, where am I at this age compared to the Joneses over there? That's what we do. Instead of like being like, you know what, I don't know if I have tomorrow, so I'm going all out in whatever I feel like I'm called to do. If I feel like God's calling me to do this, or I feel like this is a huge passion of mine, I'm not waiting, because I might not be alive.
Mm.
I,
So
yeah,
you and I have internalized this understanding, I'm sure. How does a Gen Z or a millennial or maybe even a baby boomer, because the scariest quote I ever heard was some people die at 25 but don't get buried until 75.
70.
That
Yeah, yeah.
it freaks me out. So let's say you are a 25-year-old. How do you begin this process of understanding risk? How do you just not flip the switch, but at least start the
Mm.
journey of, okay, I'm not living life the way I want to. I'm going to start now, or I'm going to try to start now. What are their first steps?
Have dealt with this, and I'm still learning this. And I think,
Mhm.
because I think I'm still not taking enough risk. The most risk I ever took was actually right out of college, crazy enough. But I think it's because we're waiting for the perfect time, and there is no such thing as the perfect time. There are things I look back like, oh, I wish I'd done that, because I was waiting for X, Y, and Z to be in place. And once X, Y, and Z is in place, then I can go do it. No, no, no. I have a friend right now that's like dealing with a lot of debt, and he's still about to go take like this course that's for like $35,000, and he's going to be, if he this fails, he's bankrupt. but he's going to take this. He's really considering taking that step because he knows if this works out. And I'm not telling everybody to go do something like that, but I'm saying like that he's not going to sit on his deathbed saying, well, what if I had done this?
Hmm.
And that's the difference between, you can live a comfortable life, but everybody lives I mean, not everybody, but a lot of people in our situations in the first world live a comfortable life. Even if you feel like you're broke, you're still living a comfortable life by comparison to people around the world.
No
So
comparison.
yeah, no comparison. There are kids without limbs in Africa right now. Like, so like, don't even try to compare it. So you're living a comfortable life, and you can do that. And if that's what you want, then so be it. I do still think you should be chasing meaning, and that's where I would suggest delving into those 4 areas. But if you want to live a life of excellence, you have to realize excellence is not an act, it's a habit.
Mhm.
And if it's a habit, then it's something you do repeatedly in all areas of your life. And I think that requires you to take initiative and realize that there's no perfect time to do anything.
Yeah, this interlink between risk and regret is huge. You're
Mm.
not going to be. I think I heard Alex Hormozzi saying, when you're 85 on your deathbed. I think most people live to 115, 120, but let's just say 85 because that's what he
Okay.
said. When you're
Okay.
85 on your deathbed, it's like you're not going to wish you had fewer crazy stories. You should ask the girl out. You should try to get the job.
Yes,
You should,
sir.
start the
Yes, sir.
business. Try to, knock on the door. Just do things, and that's it. We have risk, we have regret, we also have rejection. And Gen Z
Mm.
just have no, myself included, by the way, but we have no tolerance for rejection. And this is where the narcissism from social media comes into play because the world
Mm.
is shaped around us. And then we get hit with rejection just a little bit, just maybe like a rejection from a job interview, or
Yes, sir.
you asked a person out to prom, they said no,
Yeah.
something like that. And we're just like, oh, not everything, like I'm not the main character. Like not everything goes
Yes,
according
sir.
to my plan, according to what was in here, according to what I wanted. And so instead of pursuing that, and I'm learning how to pursue that because I hate rejection, but I hate the feeling of regret even more. I prefer the
That's good
feeling of
though.
rejection.
That's a
You know,
good sign.
I just,
That's a
you
good
know,
sign.
it happened to me yesterday. It's like I was fearing rejection so much, and I struck out. I didn't, do what I wanted to do, and I was
Mm.
just, it was eating me up. The feeling of regret, of
Mm.
just not knowing what the outcome could have been, and I hate that feeling. But I don't think that a lot of the generation hates that feeling enough. And this
Yeah.
is where, social intelligence, emotional intelligence, problem solving, creativity, all of these
Yeah.
abstract core skills that will help them in times of job automation. I realize I'm jumping around. I'll come back.
No, you're good.
But this fear of rejection and this
Yeah.
acceptance of regret, I think
Yeah.
is why this generation just doesn't want to take a risk. Also combining all of these, enough resources, enough energy, blah blah blah. I don't know. It's scary to me, and it also worries me that this generation is also going to be parents, possibly
Yeah.
to another
Eventually, at
generation.
least a lot of them will. At least a lot of
Hopefully,
them will.
hopefully, because we need,
Yeah.
I keep saying like it would be hilarious if our, Fermi paradox, great filter, if our filter is that we just don't procreate, and
Yeah.
that's why we go extinct. That'd be hilarious.
Yeah. I don't think it'll be that bad, but I do think we are heading for a population decline. And
Yeah.
I do agree with the rejection element of it. And I think a lot of the reason that people are not the rejection is even more fearful because the more we've had technology to protect us from it, the more we've not had to experience it. So when there's a greater fear behind it, there's a greater fear behind it because it's been experienced less. What is fear but the unknown, right?
Mm.
And so rejection, if you've never experienced it, I mean, my gosh, one of the when I under family, I just chose family, the term family, because I needed 4 F's for like kind of the whole idea behind it. But under families, relationships, right? And I'm talking about romantic relationships, and that is, I think, one of the most key elements of coaching people. And the reason I say that is because that's where I think most people struggle like crazy because they are on these apps. These apps are poison. And I don't think it's the best. I mean, you can find, there are a lot of people who have relationships through it, but I think it's poison in the sense that it doesn't force us to go take initiative to experience rejection in a way that prior generations had. And I think people have never developed the social psychology skills, the interpersonal relational skills that are requisite to be able to succeed in that area. in ways that they may not even know that they could have major success in, because there's so much fear around rejection. There's so much fear around rejection.
Okay, Brandon, I'll throw you a hard ball. How do you find love in the 21st century? Because I'm confused. Not me, but as a Gen Z, I'm confused. I can just download Tinder and hopefully, it's different for me as a guy, but Gen Z,
The
you
game's
know,
totally different as a dude.
yeah,
It's not even close. It's not
yeah,
even
it's
close.
no
If you're a
comparison.
girl, you have no problem finding somebody on Tinder, but that's not. But I do. The question's important. How do you find love?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I want to start with this, and I'm not just saying this to just to say it. I mean this sincerely. You cannot love without God, not fully, because
Mhm.
it's not love. It's infatuation. It's lust. It's loneliness, seeking to fill a void. Love is altruistic. It is the idea that you would lay down your life for a person.
Mhm.
And that you can't find that until you've experienced that. And the only way to experience somebody who would truly lay their life down for you is the only one who ever has.
Right.
And so I think you can't even, at least you can love, but it's a shell of your potential of how much love you have within you. I mean, I think Gandhi, like a lot of people, like you have people that have experienced and effectuated love within the world. And I don't think you're tied to being spiritual in order to do that, but I think you're limiting the capacity to which you can. Now, with that being said, how do you find these types of romantic relationships in the 21st century? Uh, when you're dealing with especially like a hookup culture,
Mhm.
um, that has jaded people. I think that destroys, and I mean this sincerely, it destroys the soul, and I mean the person with the hookup culture, because we've disconnected um
Sex from love.
sex from love. Sex is a unifying thing. They've done studies. The chemicals that are released during sex that allow us to bond, this pair bonding experience, they've done. You
Mhm.
can go look up studies on pair bonding.
Yeah.
It is diminished each time you sleep with somebody. So it's not just like, oh, it's right or wrong. I'm not about that. I'm not here to talk about that per se. I'm not. It's not just a moral thing. It has nothing to do with that per se. What it's really focused on is the idea that this is actually destroying you, and you don't realize it. You know, and I think the hookup culture plays a big part of it. So what's the solution to it all? Uh, I think you have to get yourself outside the system, just like you do with getting yourself outside the 9 to 5, the rat race. It's the
Yep.
same thing. You're in the rat race, pull yourself out of the rat race. You're in this toxic cycle of what is relationships in the 21st century, pull yourself out of it. I'm not saying don't date at all. Definitely not saying that.
Mhm.
I'm saying don't do it the way people are teaching you to do it, because it's going to
Yeah.
lead to failure. It's going to lead to depression. The amount of people that are in their my older than me, I just turned 30. I was 29 like last time we spoke, but like people are in their upper 30s who are just like totally depressed and alone because they tried to do it the way that society, and it's led to nothing.
Yep.
You got to get yourself out of that, you know?
Yeah, it's like, why would you play a broken game and then complain that you're broken because of it? Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
It doesn't
yeah.
make, it doesn't make, I mean, being personal, I experienced hookup culture very recently, and I absolutely agree. There is, and I never thought that as a guy I could feel this, but it's very empty.
Empty. Yeah.
And that's such a peculiar thing because I had like put it up on this pedestal of like, oh, this is just what you do as a young
Yeah.
person,
And
particularly a
you
young
feel like a
guy.
total G if you feel like a total G when you're doing well when you're doing well with women. Like when I was in
Yeah,
college, that was all it was about.
right.
But like it only fills the void for so long until you
Filling the
realize it's
void,
empty. Yeah.
filling the void. And this comes, we're always going, this comes back to love because love, I don't think is filling a gap. I think love is supposed to be an addition in your life. And I
Yes.
think this gap is what a lot of people, they try to gamble with money. They
Hmm.
try to maybe gamble with love, lust, prep is a better word. They overeat, they overconsume
Yes.
Netflix, um, chips, candy bars, whatever it may be, McDonald's, whatever
We
it
got to
is.
talk about that in a bit because I can tell you got
Absolutely.
some opinions on that, man.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
Oh, man. But I don't know. It's just like you can't love someone else without loving yourself 100%. And I think that's where God comes into play, is because
Mm,
when you have that
that's right.
foundation of
Yes.
it's not just me. And that's the thing is like when you have, and I'm not religious per se, but I believe in God. So
Yeah.
I guess I'm theistic, not atheistic.
That's where I started. So I'm never. I hear you. I respect it.
Yeah, I 100% believe that there's something that we don't understand that maybe we never will understand. But I feel
For
something
sure.
there. There have been too many coincidences in my life, too many kind of
Yeah.
like layups where it was just like there's
Yeah.
no way, there's no way. Like some thing is looking out for me, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that feeling of not being alone, like I
Makes a
know that
huge difference.
like I'm okay to be alone, but I'm not lonely.
That's why I really love what you said about love comes from a spot of you're already being fulfilled, basically.
Yep.
Because if you don't fill that gap first and you try to fill that gap with a person, that person will never fill the gap. They cannot fill that gap because they can't always be there. They're not always going to be perfect. They're going to do bad things to you because people do bad things. But you
Mhm.
have to be able to push past it. And when you expect that person to be your version of what you're asking a human being to fill a God-sized void,
Oh
and
yes.
and you
Oh
and you
yes.
you can't do that, man. You can't do that. And I I believe as long as people are searching for truth, and I think when you're searching for God, you're searching for truth. So like, dude, I didn't when I was in that story, I didn't tell you like I actually came away from atheism rather quickly within a couple months. So I was like, you know what, I might reject Christianity, but I do believe there's somebody or something that created all this because I believe every cause has an effect. So if you go back all the way, there's an original cause to all effects.
Mm.
And what is that cause, right? It has to be the uncaused effect, right? The uncaused cause, right? That is God. Whatever that is God. But I didn't know what that was. I just knew that that had to be God. But once I realized that I'm not alone, and from a Christian context, that God lives in me, which is very crazy, that God lives in me through the Holy Spirit, that I'm not alone, then you're able to love because it's not love to seek to fill you. It's love out of an expression of something you've already been filled with.
Right.
And that is distinct.
It's totally distinct, and I mean we've talked about like 50 idioms by now, but you know it's like you don't love the idea of the person, you love the
Mm.
person. Because as soon
Yeah.
as you know, and I've experienced this
That's
too. It's like,
wise. Yeah.
but it's like you fill your void with someone, and then immediately this is the honeymoon phase. The shine comes off, and you're just like, oh,
Oh.
you don't make me happy. You don't make me happy
Mhm.
anymore. And it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, you were never happy with the person. You were happy with what the person did for you.
And also on top of that, like there's also the idea, yeah, like you said, like they were happy with the idea of the person, but even beyond that, like you never loved them.
Right.
You liked how they made you feel.
Yes.
Because if the second they don't make you feel a certain way, you don't care about them, then you never loved them.
Hmm.
That's not love. Love is eternal. It's actually it's different than infatuation. That's temporal. When you're dealing with like emotions, anger, stuff like that, love is an eternal quality. It's actually what binds us. And I think that if something is finite for you, then it's not love.
Hmm.
That's just my opinion on that.
And you know, I guess again, I'm good at coming back to the river. So in order to have healthy relationships, in order to find love, you have to make sure that your life is also in order. So we've talked about faith. Hopefully, people are finding that, finding their why, finding their meaning. Talking about family, it doesn't just have to be blood. Now we're
Yeah,
talking about, I guess, the two most important things, which is health and wealth. Wealth we can come to afterwards, but
yeah,
health, I think we are neglecting health in every capacity. You know,
yeah.
alcohol has been grandfathered in. We're not sleeping well at all. You know,
Mm-mm.
we don't exercise
No.
like at all. It's like we're driving everywhere,
Yeah,
or, you know, public transportation, sitting down all the time. You know, offices, like there's ergonomic furniture and
yeah.
accessories, but not ergonomic working environments.
Yeah, and people are like walking a quarter of a block and they're out of breath when they get to a restaurant, right? Like, yeah, we're in a we're that's an existential crisis.
It's like even, you know, when we're talking about health, the 9 to 5 is just
Hmm.
fundamentally unhealthy. You
Agreed.
know, attention spans and whatever. So again, I'll put the ball back in your court because I feel like I've been talking enough. How do we start figuring out health? Like, what are the certain steps that one should begin to take?
So I do love what you brought up with like sleep. It's a big one, but the three that I focus on, I want to say that even though this sleep is not incorporated in that, I think that's very important. I think if you wake up at the same time every day, watch your depression go down a lot. I'm not saying it's going to go away, but if you wake up at the same time every day, they've done so many studies on this. There's a lot of science out there about this, and I didn't believe it. But just waking up at the same time consistently every day, getting your sleep pattern and rhythm will change your life. With that being said, the three that I focus on, because I think that's a really quick. thing to tell somebody, and all they have to do is just do it. That's actually one of the easiest things you can do for your health. The three that I focus on are the ones that people tend to struggle with a little bit more, which is training, physical training of some kind, whether you run, jog, whatever, CrossFit, I don't care, box, I don't really care. Nutrition, which is what we've been talking about. That's very hard in today's world because food is designed to make you addicted to it, not to nourish you. Totally different problem we're dealing with. But the last one is a very undiscussed one, which is hormonal balance.
Interesting.
That is something I focus on a lot because I realize I think a lot of I forget I wish I had remembered that I looked into this before we talked, but there's an epidemic of the percentage of people on antidepressants, anti-anxieties, etc. It's staggering. It's like 1 in 3 people are on something.
It's insane.
It might be more. I honestly, it's been a bit since I looked into it, but I think a lot of those are addressing hormonal imbalances from endocrine disrupting substances, influences, chemicals in our lives. Yeah. I think when I actually learned to balance my hormones, because I've dealt with mental health stuff from anxiety, depression. When I was a kid, I was on 6 different medications. I'm on nothing today. And a lot of that has to do, well, actually, faith is what got help legitimately. When God transformed me, legitimately did a lot for me. But the other thing that helped me a lot was balancing my hormones. And that was a big part of it.
I don't mean this in like a slick way, but it is easier said than done.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so, and I've never been there, so I'm speaking out of pure ignorance, but I assume that it's very intimidating to even begin to think of, well, what will my life be like in a transition off of this medication? That must scare the bejesus out of most people.
I suggest most people attempt to do that as their goal. Like, I think the best thing to do is get yourself in balance. And then if you can slowly wean yourself off of this to be in balance without it, amen. But if you can't, so be it. I'm not a psychiatrist in that area, and I'm definitely not going to give advice and get sued on that. But I will say I was able to find that from getting these other areas in check. And I do think a lot of it, the hormonal balance, you'll be surprised what that does, especially with depression and anxiety. Now I can't, it's not going to deal with psychosis or anything like that. But when you're talking about depression and anxiety, a lot of it, the male testosterone is I think it's like a 4th or a 3rd lower than our parents' generation was.
Yep.
That's crazy. Well, you don't think that's leading to depression. Why. Yeah, the endocrine disrupting stuff that we have going on. But like, if you don't think that's playing into our depression, that's crazy. One of the reasons they give out TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, is because of depression. So they already know. The science is already sold out on this. We already know that these are interplaying with each other. And I think a lot of people who are jumping onto these other, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, whatever, you have to discuss that with your doctor. But I think a lot of times before going so extreme on that end, you get your hormones in balance and watch what happens. And a lot of that is look into solutions instead of just talking about problems. So look into what is endocrine disrupting in your life. I have found it's not so much about the diet that you choose. It's just the idea of being nutritionally conscious. And if you are nutritionally conscious and figure out what works for you, you are going to just dramatically improve your hormones tremendously. Just even weight training produces better hormones in your life, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how we got so confused about food. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, okay, I feel like crap today. Okay, well, what have you been eating the past week? So I think I got McDonald's. I didn't eat anything for 7 hours the other day. And then I think I made myself 1 egg. It's like, dude, what do you expect?
Yeah.
What do you expect?
I totally actually empathize with those people. And it sounds crazy. I want to hear why in a bit. I'll tell you why. I love fast food, but I don't eat it. But I love it. But because it's addicting. I got addicted to it in college because I was already in shape. I was like, oh, whatever. Then I got out of shape on it. But I learned to get an addiction from it. If you never get addicted to it, don't eat it at all. But like, I did get addicted to it because it's addictive. And I found that like, I get when you're like in a pit of despair, you just feed to what your self-belief system is. If you believe I'm a fat person, you're going to do fat things. Like, that's just how life is. But at the same time, I also had to recognize, man, you have like, you know how you talk, you have to hate the feeling of um regret more than the feeling of rejection. It's the same concept for this. I had to get to the point where I hated where I was going more than I hated not having what I wanted,
Hmm.
you know? And so I do have some empathy for it, but at the same time, what I don't have empathy for is eternal excuses, because you can
Yep.
always do something. I had a friend that was 400 pounds. All he did was start walking. 400 pounds. All he did was start walking. He lost 100 pounds in a year just by walking every day.
Insane.
He still ate the foods he wanted. He just brought back, he like did a slight intermittent fasting and he walked. That is baseline. Anybody, unless you're paraplegic or something like that, you can do that, right?
Absolutely.
And lost 100 pounds. You know, he's still overweight, but anybody can improve. So I don't have empathy for people who are unwilling to improve, but I do have empathy for people who are like, oh, I struggle with this. That makes sense.
Sure. No, if you're struggling with it 100%, then I think that if you understand that you're struggling with it, then you're actively looking for solutions. But again,
Yeah.
it's like you can research. There's so much information out there, and I put information with an asterisk. There's
Hmm.
so much information out there regarding the effects of fast food. There's so much information out there, like Dr. David Sinclair, Dr. Rhonda Patrick. Like
Hmm.
you, just as two examples of people, Dr. Peter Attia, three examples of people that talk about diet, the importance of
Yeah.
diet. They talk about
Yeah.
exactly what to eat, what not to eat. Derek from More Plates, More Dates, I think.
Okay.
Not too familiar with them. I'm just naming people. But there's so much data and content out there, easily consumable, for
Yeah.
you to orient yourself to not consume McDonald's. And this is why I have little empathy, because if you can understand why you don't watch CNN or Fox, because
Yeah.
it's junk information, no
Yeah.
offense
It
to
is.
those
Oh, it
people
is. It is.
or to those organizations, but it is like junk information. You have a junk
Yeah.
information diet. How do you not abstract that when you're in the McDonald's drive-through? It doesn't make any sense to me. It's like,
Yeah.
sure, it's filling, but it's not fulfilling.
Yeah, but I think it's like a drug addiction. It's the same. You know how we're talking about people who are chasing, sleeping around, people are chasing. It's their void filler.
Okay.
That's just for a glutton, that's their void filler, right? And I've used so many different apertures for to fill my void in the past that I can kind of relate with it all. But I, at the end of the day, as I said, where my empathy ends is when you're not willing to at least try something to improve, because you can always improve, even if it's just like, you know what, I'm gonna keep eating my McDonald's once a day, which is crazy, but you can. I know that's crazy, but you still can improve even from there by just let's start eating some vegetables around that, or let's start eating a little clean around that, so I can have my meal at the end of the day. It makes me happy, but their other meals are going to be clean. I'm going to do it in a certain window, and I'm going to make sure I go to the gym every day. But I love my McDonald's, so I'm still going to get my McDonald's once a day. I guarantee you, if you were eating McDonald's and like all this garbage and sitting on your couch and eating chips, to go from that and still being able to keep your McDonald's, that's at least progress. And if you're at least in this, you're either growing or dying. So if you're at least on the path of growth, I consider that a win. Eventually, I think you will want to leave those things behind when you see the success, but a lot of people don't believe they can achieve it. And I think that's why people don't even try. I think that's also has to deal with business. People won't take the risk because they don't believe they can do it. A lot of people who are 300 pounds, their family is 300 pounds their whole life. They don't believe they can do it, but you
Hmm.
can. You just have to start with one step.
Well, how do you find the strength to start with one step? Is this all a mental game?
I think all of it's. I'm not going to. That's a cop out answer. I do think it's all intertwined, but I think it's a mental and spiritual. If I'm going to get down to both of them, I
Okay.
think it's a mental and spiritual game. I think you. So when I say spiritual in that sense, I say mental in the sense that like, oh, it's daunting. Spiritual in the sense that you have the lies in your head that tell you you can't. I think that's from the enemy. So I think when you have the lies in your head, they're like, you aren't good enough to do this. You've not succeeded before. That's the spiritual mental kind of interplaying. Because then your spirit gets down and you don't believe, you self reject. And when you're in self rejection, you're in spiritual death. And so I think it's the mental and spiritual intertwining in ways that it's very difficult to overcome when you're in a true pit of darkness. So I think that plays a lot into it.
So the last pillar is finances, and this is a big one. And money is a touchy topic
Yeah.
for a lot of people. Um, uh, Most people don't understand money. Most people,
No.
unfortunately, and I'm one of those people where I just have never really understood money until you realize how much you need to understand it.
Mm,
You never have, like as you were saying, if you grow up in a comfortable household, you never really need to understand the world
yeah.
because everybody else understands it for you.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of asking how do you teach people about money, what are the common misconceptions about money that that you've encountered?
Honestly, and we can get into that, and I'll answer that first. Actually, I think it's the idea of we live in a consumer society, and you have to break that mindset. That the best things to spend your money on are not just things that are for enjoyment. I think we don't understand what an asset is. If you were to ask me what it is an asset, and I don't think we understand that assets and liabilities. If we just went through that conversation alone, you would be shocked how many people have no even remote idea that framework at all. But I think honestly, the biggest thing that a lot of people just need to start with is this debt crisis that we're dealing with.
Mhm.
And if you keep, like you said, people are buying groceries on pay later, man. Like we're in trouble. We're in trouble when we're buying like couches on an interest, like that. I think we are in that trouble. The greatest decision I've had years when I was like starting out that I was making like 30 grand a year. I wasn't making much of anything, but I still live better than most people. And here's why. I have always, the only debt I've ever had outside of student debt was a mortgage.
Mm.
I buy my cars outright. I don't buy anything I don't even like owning subscriptions. I actually don't have a Netflix account and all that stuff. Not because I don't have them anyways, but like, it's not so much that they don't interest me. It's actually a lot in part because I don't like having subscriptions. You'd be surprised if you were to go through all the subscriptions you have, how much money you're losing to that a month. And I'm not saying that um, that's the only way to look at it. I think generating more wealth is a great way to look at things. A lot of people take that approach, but I do think that we are in a debt crisis for a reason because everybody just thinks they can generate more wealth quickly, and it's easy to just throw something on a card. I think debt management, dude. I got this like I'm staying in this condo until I buy another property out here right now. There's a condo I owned. I was renting out to one of my tenants. I was a landlord out while I was in Nashville,
Mhm.
and I made like $50,000 just keeping this,
Mm.
like just for a year.
You know, all this entire conversation, all I hear as an underlying reason, I guess, is this is not the age of information. This is not the age of data. This is the age of distraction.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
McDonald's, Netflix, subscriptions, social media, consumer materialistic culture,
Mm-hmm.
Tinder, Bumble, Hinge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this all comes back again to meaning, to finding your why. And
Mm,
I don't understand how you continue to absorb these distractions. You continue
mm,
to pursue these distractions because it's like if you're dealing with something, and this is why the God-sized hole speaks volumes to me, is because if you understand that it's a God-sized hole, why do you not look to God?
mm.
It's like
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
again, it might just be my immaturity talking. It might just be my comfort in my own skin talking.
Yeah.
I 100% understand that I have many blind spots that need to be filled with experience, but it just seems like such a simple answer is awaiting everybody. And obviously, we have our own paths. We're all going to get there in our own way on our own time. But how do so many people fall for this age of distraction? This can't be emergent. It doesn't make sense to me that so many people in so many generations just are addicted to their phones just because they're
Yeah. It is. It is. I was going to say, like, it's funny enough. Our parents' generation didn't have this when they were younger, but now you
yeah,
can find some of those addicted people to their cell phone or people who are elderly. It's crazy
it's
because
insane.
what happened is we hacked the psyche over the past about really the past 100 years, and now we have the technology to leverage that in ways to keep people addicted. The goal of a lot of corporations and businesses is to make you addicted to whatever they're selling, whether that be their food, whether that be their platform, because if you're not addicted, you're going somewhere else. So they have to leverage everything they can to make you addicted, and things that make you addictive are generally bad for you. So you are the product today, you know? And so that's the problem, man.
Yeah, Reed Hastings in 2017, the CEO of Netflix, I guess former CEO, he said Netflix's biggest competitor is sleep, just to give you an idea. And just speaking of that, I think it was E.O. Wilson said that we have godlike technologies, um, um, medieval institutions, and Paleolithic emotions. It's like
Mm,
those are the orders of magnitude difference between individuals, society, and technology. So, if our psyches have been hacked, how do we hack civilization back as an individual and as a collective? This is not just for Gen Z, but this is for, frankly, anybody listening. We all understand, and I don't mean to, bitch and complain as a Gen Z, but I do think we need
mm,
to really have a serious conversation about where society is at right now. And the fact that we're not happy
mm,
with where society is at right now, but we're all okay with not doing anything. We're okay with not taking a risk to do something to
mm.
build and to cure. It strikes me as unnerving. So just from your yeah, go for it.
No, I'm saying, man, I think it is unnerving, and I think it's this is where politics actually does come into play. I think we have created a society that the bottom line is money and power. I mean, from everything, like even relationships, it's about power nowadays. Everybody's playing the power game, right? Like the people use ghosting as a means to be able to not even have to deal with the reconciling issues. We're dealing with the bottom line is like there's more laws to protect corporations, and I'm not trying to get too political with it a lot of times than there are for the common folks. And the only reason I say that is like, and I actually don't come from this from a particularly extreme left or extreme right standpoint at all. But when you're dealing with the fact that like bank fraud carries more weight uh, than certain child molestation cases,
Mm,
or when you're dealing with people who are getting killed, like there's like second degree murder charges that you can get less for than bank fraud. That's crazy.
yeah,
Our society's corrupt at that point.
yeah.
Our priorities are out of whack. Out of whack. You can burn like 15 dogs in cages and get a sixth of the sentence if you write a fraudulent check that's big enough for the bank. Like, that's crazy, man.
Yeah. It's silly of me to ask the question, so let me backtrack. It's silly of me to ask the question of how do we get out of this? Let me ask the question, how do you begin to shape your mindset to get out of this? Because just like with McDonald's, just like with love, just like
Mm-hmm.
with God, it's not about the outcome, it's about the journey. It's
Mm,
about realizing that something is wrong, then taking steps, slow but steady, purposeful, with intent
yeah.
to to find a solution, whatever that solution may be. And so if people are listening and they do agree with this sentiment of society is not where we want it to be,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody is alive right now that doesn't want society to function in a better way than what it
Yeah.
is right now.
I honestly think this is a very difficult thing to do. But have you ever been like on a, and this is kind of a side tangent, but it's relevant very much so. Have you ever been like on a cruise or something like that and just not had your phone at all? Have you ever done anything like that where you just couldn't have your
Yeah.
phone for like a couple days? It doesn't matter camping. I don't really care.
Every Saturday I turn it off and throw it away.
Yes. And
Yeah.
do you ever feel like more conscious of your surroundings and what's going on
The
when that
first couple
happens?
of times it's massive amounts of FOMO, but then you're just like, yeah, but nothing. Like I'm not interested in what's going on
Really?
there anyway. Yeah, it's
I,
it's peaceful.
I found actually like I was on a cruise. I didn't want. I was like, you know what? I don't need it. So I just didn't even have it for like a couple days. Day one, it was like there was FOMO, like you're saying.
Yeah.
By day two and a half, day three, my social skills improved because I
Oh,
don't have this. I can't go do that. I can't go and do that. I wasn't. If you are if you are putting yourself in cycles of distraction, opening your social media, going and looking at Google, going and reading the news, whatever, what do you think is going to happen to your mind? You're going to exist in a state of like, you're not ADHD, but a lot of those symptoms are going to be manifesting in your life. I found, I'm not saying to live in a hut, but remove yourself from as many of the things that are designed to keep you addicted as possible.
Yep.
And when you can, because I know you can't live in the 21st century without a phone. So I'm not trying to be unrealistic here, but I was shocked what just putting down the stuff, getting rid of analysis paralysis and just going and doing, get rid of analysis paralysis, get rid of the distractions, as many as you can. Look at, say, what are the strongholds in my life? What are the strongholds in my life? What are the areas where I'm like, you know what, for me, I realized Instagram was poison for me. I got rid of it. That was for me. Now that's not for everybody, but like whatever is, you look at your life and say, what do I spend most of my day doing? If I'm unhappy, that means I need to change what I'm doing. Otherwise, how are you going to change the circumstances of your mind, right? And I think, one, it's look at what you're spending most of your time on. And a lot of people are like, wow, I spend 6 hours a day on my phone. Pull up your phone, look how many hours a day you're spending on that. Or what are you prioritizing that in your life that's really not leading to any fulfillment? And I think, like we talked about, just circling back to like the entrepreneur stuff, like, dude, the biggest problem I see with entrepreneurs is actually has nothing to do with money, has nothing to do with connections. It has to do with analysis paralysis and not going out and doing it. So I think all that's
agree.
played.
100% agree. Would you be open to a rapid fire round just as we end the podcast?
Yeah, let's do it.
Rapid
I'm
fire
gonna try my
questions?
best. I'll give you my best honest answers. Let's do it.
Absolutely. 2024 election. Just answer with whatever comes to your mind.
RFK Jr. is going to change everything.
Future of America?
Hopeful but doubtful.
Future of technology?
Consuming.
Russia-Ukraine war?
Politicized.
Necessity of military service?
My opinions have changed on that. Even somebody who's been in the military, I think they've changed on that. I'm going to give you a little bit longer answer on that one. I just think they've changed on that because the military for anybody used to be like, when we were talking about the free world, it used to mean defending the free world. I think it's now defending the interest of the military industrial complex in a lot of ways. And I'm still in as a chaplain. So that's, I'm not saying that like it's a bad thing all the time, but I don't know if you saw this. This is really out there. I don't know if you saw the story about Aaron Bushnell, who incinerated himself in front of the Israeli embassy over the war in Gaza.
Wow.
So there's a lot behind that whole discussion, but it's my position on that's changed. I do think it's, if you don't have discipline, go do it. But you are going to be serving interests that aren't just about what you were told growing up.
Yeah, well, we'll leave it at that. Landing on Mars?
We'll do it soon.
Yeah?
We'll do it soon. Yeah, we'll do it soon.
And last but not least, advice for Gen Z.
Don't wait. Go live
Brandon,
now.
thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, man. It's always great talking.